Yep, there we go.
Here we go. Perfect. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. We've probably got a lot of folks on the call, so we're going to give a little bit of time for everyone to get in. While we're waiting, and if you're in here, go ahead and throw in the chat what year you as a student are graduating, if it's this May 2024, or future years 2025, 2026, or if you're a parent, what year your student is going to be graduating. We always like to see what those years look like. I got a lot of 2024s.
Oh,
Got a
do we have an
planner.
early one? I see someone prepping early. This is
That's
good.
right.
Couple people prepping early. Great.
Love it. Good planning. Good planning.
Here's another one. Who is of the families, the parents who have a class of 2024? How many of you are freaking out with this financial aid delay with the FAFSA and all this crazy stuff? If you are, do the little reactions, do the little emotions. Give me like the crying or something, thumbs up. Like who's freaking out a little bit?
Yeah. Oh, that's it. I like the
Yeah,
emojis.
yeah. Hit those emojis. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully after tonight you won't be freaking out so much.
Yeah.
Well, at least the process of
Mhm.
filing these financial aid things.
Yeah. That's what we're here for. Help alleviate some of that stress that comes with the FAFSA and all that. So
And as people pull in, obviously for this little introductory, we're just using the chat, but just just general reminder as we go on, if there's questions, can you use the Q&A? Honestly, it's my brain works better. I can track things better in the Q&A. So if you have questions, please just use the Q&A, not the chat. And admittedly, what I tend to see, I've done a few of these, what everyone's going to probably start bombarding me with similar questions. And it's probably something Mike or I are going to cover. So I might just be like, oh, we'll answer it live. We'll answer it live. But please start answering, if you have questions, start throwing them in the Q&A. And we'll make sure we'll try to best of our ability to tackle, as many of them as we can. Just keep in mind, if you have like a very specific question about like, hey, and we need details and we need to go into research, we probably can't get into that level of an answer. But if you got questions, just let us know, because maybe we can give some good general guidance.
yeah. And we'll talk a little bit too at the end about, JP was mentioning diving into the weeds on some things that we won't be able to answer in the Q&A. We'll talk about how to connect with us later to be able to dive into the weeds. So we won't pass through that without giving you all some resources on how to better connect with us.
Yeah, we won't leave you hanging.
Yeah, for sure.
And
right.
and hello to Veronica. Hello to Linda. Thank you, college counselors.
Yes, absolutely. Awesome, awesome. Well, I think we might be good to get started. What do you think, JP?
I think so. I think people
in?
are probably anxious and we're saying, please help us.
Ready to go.
So
Okay.
let's do this.
Let's do it. Well, Happy New Year, everybody. I don't know, is the 16th too late to say Happy New Year?
It's still January. Go for it.
Okay. Well, my name is Mike Kinderman. I'm a college aid pro planning expert. I'll let JP introduce himself in a second, but we're really excited to chat with y'all tonight. So today we're going to focus on kind of a high level overview of FAFSA in college planning, and then take a little bit deeper dive into the FAFSA and go through some specifics on what we've seen in the soft launch and now into the regular launch. So we're going to dive into some of those details. And then, like I mentioned, the last thing is we'll open up some opportunities on how we can better connect if we want to do that moving forward, giving you opportunities. So we'll be able to cover all of that in that time frame. So a little bit about me. I'm the director of scholarships at the University of Oklahoma. I've been doing that for a couple of years. And prior to that, I was actually the director of the Money Coach program there, where our entire job was meeting one-to-one and building financial plans, whatever that looked like, right? Which you can imagine goes a bunch of different ways. So I've been doing this for a while, very much enjoy doing it, helping people build out a financial plan and implement that to reduce stress. So that's a little bit about me. JP, I'll let you introduce yourself.
My name is JP. The joke I like to make is I am the Santa Claus of financial aid because I'm working on my Santa Claus beard. So anyway, I used to be a director of financial aid. So Mike is still working in financial aid office at University of Oklahoma, like you said. I used to be a director of financial aid at the University of Southern California on the West Coast. So uh, did that. Golly, I've been doing this for 20 plus years now. When I left the financial aid office, when I left USC, I went into private practice and been helping families ever since, trying to pay less for college, how to navigate this whole college process, admissions, and financial aid, and and honestly, I think one of the reasons I am so happy and to be working and partnering with College Aid Pro, and Mike, I think can say the same, is we all have a similar value and mission in that we're really just trying to help families be smarter shoppers when it comes to college, because that's really how you should think about it. The colleges want you to be like, oh, that they're in charge and it's they're, you want to seek them. Really, you're in charge. You can be this, you're the shopper. You can look around and try to really find what's the right school for your child. And so that's what we kind of try to help you figure out.
Yeah, perfect. I didn't mention this when we started, but if y'all need any closed captioning, feel free. We have the settings where you can open up closed captioning and see any of that. I forgot to mention that on the front end. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get started. All right. JP, can you see that?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can. It looks good on my end.
Excellent. All right. The waiting is over. The FAFSA is now live. So very exciting. JP kind of mentioned this. So the College Aid Pro, the mission is to end the student debt crisis. And the way we go about doing that is empowering families to be smarter shoppers. So building out financial plans, understanding options, understanding next steps. That is something that energizes us. It's something that we enjoy doing. So we are excited to be able to chat with you a little bit today. But know that this is, like JP was saying, a value that we really share, which is why we love working at College Aid Pro. So there's those two handsome devils. All right. So you should have received an email prior to the webinar giving you an opportunity to go into the MyCap platform and sign up for a free account. So if you haven't already, I think JP might be able to drop that link in the chat here in just a minute. But definitely get in there, create your free account if you haven't. This is something that is an excellent tool to be able to start seeing your SAI and just what college costs look like. So really encourage you to get in there and create the free account. I'll kind of circle back to this in a little bit, but don't want to spend too much time on that right now. All right, so I'm going to do a high level overview of kind of financial aid, right? Some of you might be more knowledgeable about this. So kind of going to do a high level overview. So what is financial aid, right? Financial aid is the discount to the sticker price or the cost of attendance. So that can look a number of different ways. We've got need-based aid or need-based grant. So free money awarded based on the student's profile. So that's something that obviously we're all trying to get after and utilize. We've also got merit-based scholarships, free money awarded to students based on their talent, right? A lot of times we think of GPA or test scores, but we also have other talent-based things that students can qualify for based on merit scholarships. An important thing to know too is that some schools require a FAFSA to be on file for some merit-based awards. So if you're thinking, okay, I might not qualify for some need-based aid, still for merit-based aid, it's important to have the FAFSA on file. And we'll dive into it a little bit later about all the different reasons why it's advantageous to have FAFSA on file, not just for need-based stuff. And then that last little box there is self-help, right? So this is the least ideal of the three. This is looking at loans or work study, right? Borrowed money or earned money through work. So it's not free money. Another thing, if loans are going to be part of the financial plan, there are no better loans out there than the FAFSA loans, right? Either subsidized or unsubsidized loans, depending on what you qualify for. Everyone will qualify for something. So that's important. Some folks say, well, I might complete it. I'm not going to qualify for anything. Everyone at a minimum will qualify for an unsubsidized loan, which typically will have the best rates of any loan that you can utilize in the space. Next up, diving into the need-based aid. So looking at what need is and who is eligible, it's basically cost of attendance minus SAI equals need. So cost of attendance is that sticker price, all those different categories of tuition, fees, housing and food, etc. So that's that sticker price that you probably see on the website. The student aid index is what you get from completing the FAFSA. You'll see a student aid index. And if the student aid index is lower than the cost of attendance at a school, you're going to see or you're going to be eligible for need at that school. And one thing to clarify when folks complete the FAFSA, and I've heard this a number of times, is, well, I'm not going to qualify for anything, or I'm not going to qualify for any need-based aid. A lot of time what that language is saying is I'm not going to qualify for the Pell Grant, but know that the Pell Grant is federal money that's given through if you qualify for it based on your SAI. But there's a lot of need-based aid out there at schools specifically that folks don't realize they might qualify for through this process. And as we've seen, college costs are going up and up and up. The sticker price is higher and higher and higher, which means with the higher sticker price, when you're subtracting your SAI, there's a greater chance of having that need there. So just one thing to consider with that.
Hey, Mike,
Yeah.
can you, what I think would be helpful is some, like I understand this formula, right? But I think what might be helpful for a lot of families is if they can kind of see this in action. Can you maybe pull up a MyCap, the software that we try to use to help families do this? Maybe they can see this in action, see cost of attendance, see some sample SAI calculations, student aid index, but see what the financial aid might look like.
Absolutely. Yeah, let me share my screen and see. All right. So here's my cat profile, and it kind of shows. So one thing, with all the confusing stuff that's going on up here, you see two different SAIs just to make things a little bit more confusing, right? To clarify that the federal SAI, that's what you'd get from completing the FAFSA, and the institutional SAI would be from a CSS profile for some private schools. Some schools have their own application, but that's why you could see multiple SAIs on this MyCap profile. So the important thing, and we hit on this a lot, and we're hitting on it tonight, is to not just look at the sticker price. So I've just pulled up a few schools here: Stanford, UCLA, UC Boulder, and you can see there's different sticker prices, right? With Stanford being the one that has the highest sticker price. So if we're just shopping around for schools and we're looking at the sticker price, that's going to turn us off of Stanford. But on this profile, you can see your net cost for year one. The lowest by far is Stanford, right? Based on the information I've plugged into this. So that's why this tool can be really helpful because you get on here, create your free account, plug in some schools, put in your information, and it allows you to do just this, to be able to see that. And so this can be really, really helpful as a way to, again, get into the weeds a little bit more on SAI, but also school shopping and making sure you're looking at all possible opportunities. So I don't want to hit on that too much, but just a great resource there that can be utilized. So highly encourage that. Again, if you haven't created your free account, definitely do so whenever you can. Let me see if I can go back to sharing. See how good my technology use is here. We're back on. Okay. Excuse me. So again, I've hit on this a little bit, but why should you submit the CSS profile? Why should you submit a FAFSA? There's a lot of money that's typically left on the table, millions of dollars left on the table for folks that potentially could qualify that don't end up completing the forms. I always encourage families I talk to complete the FAFSA. It's always going to be advantageous. Some schools like I mentioned, they won't consider you for certain types of merit aid without having a FAFSA on file. It's not going to necessarily make you eligible or ineligible for more. It's just they want to see it on file, and then they'll get it. Um, and some schools even have it where the first year, if you don't apply for aid, they don't let you come back to that and apply for it later. And even within the year, stuff can happen, right? Divorce can happen. Financial plans are great, but the implementation of those plans look very different. And we never know when that roadblock is going to come in our plan. So that's another benefit of creating that, because if loans are not part of the plan when you start it and then something happens and loans need to be part, FAFSA is completed, you've got the subsidized or unsubsidized loan as part of it, so that's important. Consideration for appeal. So the University of Oklahoma does not do any appeal for a student that doesn't have FAFSA on file, and that's not just need-based appeals, that's merit-based or need-based. So just an important component to think about with that. And then I've hit on this a couple of times, the federal loans. These are going to be the best options in terms of loans if those are needing to be part of your plan. So getting started, what's the first step? You need to get on and create your FSA ID. So, excuse me. So this is required for each student and at least one parent. So for all contributors. So you'll need to get on and fill out some information, name, social security number, address, things like that. And then it takes about 2 to 3 days to get it verified, and then you'll get an email about the verification. We have seen a few instances where it's a little bit longer than 3 days. So just in terms of planning, that's something you want to get out ahead of and get that knocked out, get that created, because again, you'll need that to both access and submit the FAFSA, and having that created prior to even going into it alleviates some headaches there. So FAFSA is live. It was a soft launch. Now I think we're out of the soft launch timeframe. I think today might be the first day, but I will say with certain confidence, I'm sure there's still going to be some issues. I think JP can probably agree with me there. So even though it's over and it should be live 24/7, know that there's probably going to be some glitches in the next few days. Hopefully they've caught most of those, but just be aware that you should be able to log in and see that. One thing to recognize when you're completing your FAFSA, if you've seen someone else do it, they're not always going to be identical, right? If you looked over a friend's shoulder as they were completing it, and then you go to start completing it and you see, hey, this doesn't look exactly like mine, that's normal, right? There's some variations to that. It's supposed to be more intuitive. The FAFSA simplification was supposed to make it a little bit more simplistic and unique to you. So just know that when you're completing it, it's not going to look exactly the same from one iteration to the next. And then do your best to complete it. Save progress, return to the form if you can't complete it, and get it completed whenever you can. So thinking about the timeline, so today's January 16th. None of the information is going to be sent to colleges until the end of January. That's what we've been communicated. So end of January, we're assuming January 31st. This may get pushed back, so you have time. So that's important to know. And I'm not saying wait until the end of January to complete this, but just recognize that this kind of information isn't going to be sent over. Excuse me. So the FAFSA submission summary, this used to be the SAR, the student aid report. This is not going to be available till the end of January as well, kind of lining up with that timeline that the schools will be receiving that information. So I think that's important. And when you think of timeline, you think of deadlines for each school. It's important to look at the school's website to say, okay, what is their specific website, or what is their specific deadline on their website, because they've been pushing them back, right? Every school is recognizing this delay with the FAFSA launching. We're also recognizing all of the glitches that are going on. So schools are very understanding in terms of pushing back deadlines that they normally have for FAFSA to be completed because of this unique situation this year. So just be aware of that checking the deadline on the school's website is going to be the way to go. And before you get on, it's always good to prepare all the information you need, any documents you might need. Some things that are important to have is just asset account balances. So this would be checking, savings accounts, just knowing what that current balance is. Also investments, which does include real estate, equity, which is not your primary home. So this would be if you have more than one home, something other than your primary home, you would consider that on your FAFSA. You do not consider your equity in your primary home on your FAFSA. That's a common mistake we see at OU, is that being included when it should not. So for most families, income information will automatically populate into FAFSA after consent is given. Sorry, I need a drink of water. Got a frog in my throat. And consent is something that is kind of required this year on the front end. So you'll see that automatically populate into the FAFSA. If you don't see income information, just know that that's normal, right? It's trying to automatically populate. It's trying to make it simpler. There are a few exceptions to this under specific circumstances, but these are few and far between. So most likely you're probably not going to be inputting that income information. You'll need to know current business value. If you're a business owner, I don't know if we've been getting any Q&A about, businesses, but that's something that's harder to answer in a Q&A. That would be more of sit down with one of the pros, chat through that, because they're going to ask you a number of questions to get information about the business before doing that. And then the list of colleges you're applying to. Know that list on the front end. When you go in, you can put in up to 20. If you're going to do that and be a go-getter, that's fantastic. But they'll allow you to list up to 20 colleges on the FAFSA. So I'm going to turn it over to JP to talk about how to get started.
All right. Thank you, Mike. So let's get into the FAFSA itself. So one of the questions asked is like, what's the website? Where do you go? Honestly, just Google FAFSA.gov, and I'm going to just put it in the chat with the link. It's going to ultimately forward you to studentaid.gov/FAFSA, but the simplest thing is just do FAFSA.gov. It's going to bring you to the website. And admittedly, what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to do like a screen by screen walkthrough of every possible of what the filling out the FAFSA is, for two reasons. One, it'd be a boring presentation to just do a screen by screen. And two, as Mike said earlier, the FAFSA's got a little bit of dynamic programming to it, meaning depending on how you answer a question, it might trigger some other questions and someone else might not see those questions. Instead, what I think is going to be more helpful for you guys is I want to give you an overview of the flow of how they redesigned this FAFSA. If anyone here has done a FAFSA in the past, this one looks very different. It's going to feel different. It's filled with all sorts of glitches. There's all sorts of problems with it. It doesn't work very well right now. And so what I want to kind of share with you is how to navigate it and hopefully, I can't guarantee, but hopefully not have a glitch, so that in the end, both the child and the parent are going to be able to successfully e-sign their portion of the FAFSA. So that's my main goal here, is to help just navigate it versus going like slide by slide of what each potential screen is. And I'll share some common mistakes that I've seen along the way. Okay, can you go ahead, Mike? Thank you. So when you go to that FAFSA website, and again, I put the link in the chat, FAFSA.gov, and you're going to basically be asked to log in with your FSA ID, which Federal Student Aid ID. And if you're going to need to have that set up prior. And if you haven't, you'll see a little link at the bottom that says create an account. So go ahead and do that process. But the thing I'm going to suggest is that we start with the student and work our way through the student's part of the FAFSA, and then we will work on the parents section second. So to kind of give you a visual of what I mean, go ahead, Mike, and think of this as like a workflow. So when the student's going to log in with their FSA ID first, they're going to basically be asked some personal, what this section called personal circumstances. And those are the questions that are asking them, like, what it's really trying to do is determine, are they a dependent student or are they an independent student for federal financial aid? And so it's going to ask questions like, are they an orphan? Are they a ward of the court? Are they a refugee? Are they homeless? All these kinds of questions. And basically, if all these questions, if the answer is none apply, like none of these apply, none of these scenarios apply, it's going to say, okay, the student is dependent upon their parents. And at that point, it's going to ask the student to invite a contributor. And I'll explain that in a second, but basically, parents, you're the contributor. And so it's going to go down from personal circumstances down to invite, if assuming it says your child's a dependent, it's going to then say, okay, child, invite a contributor. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But then the student is going to continue on with their FAFSA application. It's going to ask certain demographics, like your gender, your ethnicity, variety of things like that. Admittedly, none of those answers are going to affect financial aid eligibility, but the government wants to track that kind of data. And then it's going to ask them about financials. And basically, all of us, students and the parents, for the most part, all of us have to consent and say that we are granting given our approval for the Department of Ed to access our tax information from the IRS. And we really have no choice. You have to approve. You have to give your consent to do this. Now, even if your child doesn't file taxes, I mean, I think I've only met one child so far this year, this particular year, who worked enough that they filed taxes. But most children aren't filing taxes. So even if they didn't file taxes, they still have to say, yes, I approve, I give my consent to access the IRS, let the Department of Ed access the IRS information. So make sure you consent and say yes. And there's also going to be what I think it's a poorly worded question. There's going to be a question that asks, do you want to be, to the student, do you want to be considered only for an unsubsidized loan? The answer should be no. I don't want to only be considered for an unsubsidized loan. I want to be considered for all the financial aid that Mike shared earlier in the presentation. I want to be considered for grants. I want to be considered for everything. So the answer to that question is going to be no. And so when it says, do you want to be only considered for unsubsidized loan, mark no on that. And then the student's going to basically fill out their schools. They can list up to 20 schools. That's probably going to be the most time-consuming part of the application, to be perfectly honest, because you have to search for the name or type in their code. But it's nothing hard. It just takes a little bit of time. And then the last step the student's going to do is sign it. Okay. And then they're going to sign it. And then parents, you're the contributor, you're going to do your portion. And we'll talk about that in a second. But essentially, if the parents, if you were married, and you filed your taxes jointly in 2022, in that scenario, only one parent is going to have to really sign and fill out the FAFSA. If the parents were unmarried in 2022, maybe just never got married, or so they're unmarried, or they maybe filed taxes separately. In that scenario, the student's going to have to invite both parents to be a contributor, and both parents are going to have to fill out a FAFSA of their own. Okay. But essentially, if both parents were married in 2022, they're married to each other, and they filed jointly, and they're still married, only one parent's going to have to do this and fill it out. And if there's a scenario where the parents were married in 2022, but maybe now are legally separated or legally divorced, then we have to figure out who's the custodial parent, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then we say who's the custodial parent. The custodial parent will be invited to complete their part of the FAFSA. And in that scenario, that's when the custodial parent will have to manually enter their tax information. We can't just take a combined tax return from 2022 because it's got the ex-spouse on there. So that's where we'd have to manually enter the numbers. So just hopefully that was clear as mud. But this is going to be the kind of the workflow for determining who's a contributor besides the student, I should say. Okay. Okay, so let's just talk real quick about if there's a situation where parents recently divorced. I've actually had 3 different families hire me for a consult in the last 2 days who were either just divorced or in the process of getting a divorce. The definition of who's going to be the custodial parent has changed with this new FAFSA. And this could be a big deal for families, especially if you already have older kids in college and one parent has historically been the custodial parent. Based upon the new definition, it may change. The new definition of who's going to be the custodial parent is who provided the most financial support in the most recent 12 months. And that's an important thing to think about because the FAFSA is going to be asking for your tax information from 2022. This is 2024, right? It's asking for your 2022 tax information, so 2 years ago. But if you're divorced and you got to figure out who's the custodial parent, it's essentially who paid more in 2023. It's the most recent 12 months that you got to look at to determine who was the custodial parent. And so that's an important characteristic to know. And if and this wouldn't probably ever realistically be the case, but if 2 parents tell me, hey, we paid equally. I actually had a conversation with a parent, 2 divorced parents this morning. They said, oh, we contribute equally. And I had to dig down a little bit deeper to figure out, okay, who really paid a little bit more. But if you document it and you said, oh yeah, we paid equally, it's to the dollar equal. Well, then the government says whoever made more is the custodial parent. So if you're still trying to figure out who's the custodial parent, if it's close, like you're kind of close about who's equal, now's the time to be strategic in figuring out who should be the custodial parent between the two. Don't fall to the what the government says. Then it's going to be who makes more. Try to be a little strategic on that. You got some time, maybe to throw some money in there to maybe get someone else to be the custodial parent. So just be smart on that. Oh, another thing I'll just say this because this was a common question I've been getting this week. I've had situations where parents are like physically separated, but not yet legally separated or divorced. It's something that's in the works. The FAFSA is very clear on this. If you're not legally separated yet, you got to then say you're married. Like if it's what is your legal status the day you're filing your FAFSA. So even if it's something that's like, oh, it'll be finalized next month, but legally today you're still married, you have to say married. And then that would constitute you doing an appeal with the schools later down the road. And we can talk about that. Mike can talk about that later. But anyway, sorry, go on to the next page for me. And so the thing I want to make clear to families with some of these new terms that the Department of Ed's using, some of these new terms like contributor. I've had some parents very concerned about this being called a contributor, and they're like, "What's that mean?" Because I think a natural instinct is that a parent's going to think, "Does this mean I have to pay for college for my kid's college?" And the answer is no. When you're as a contributor, it basically just means you're contributing your information to determine how much your child can qualify for financial aid, but it does not mean that you are required to pay anything for your kid's college. there's no law that says, mom, dad, you have to pay for college. So that hasn't changed. So just know that when you're doing this FAFSA, you're not signing anything that says, I agree, I am going to pay for my kid's college. There's no law that forces you to do that. You're just saying, I agree, I will share my information to help you determine how much my child will qualify for. So just understand there is a subtle difference there. Okay, next page. And so think back to that flow chart that we showed a couple screens ago. When the student answers their personal circumstance questions, and assuming the FAFSA determines your child is dependent, it's going to go, invite the contributors and essentially invite the parents. Now, again, if you're in this scenario where you were married in 2022, and you filed a joint tax return and you still are married, even though you see two columns here, you're only going to fill out the left-hand columns where you say you're going to give one parent. You put in one of the two parents. It's in very small print, but the second column is going to say, do not fill this out unless instructed. So for if you're a situation where, again, you were married in 2022, taxes said married, filing jointly, you're only going to put one parent and it's going to be on the left-hand column, not the right. If it's a situation where maybe parents were unmarried, then that little disclaimer is not going to be there. Then both parents will be invited to do their part of the FAFSA. Okay, Mike. So the workflow here, the flow of the way that seems to work the best and not break down the FAFSA and keep the website working, is the student's going to go through all of their sections, right? They're going to fill out all their sections and they're going to sign. But when they invited the contributor, aka you, the parent, you're going to get an email, and it's going to look kind of like this, where it basically says you've been invited to help your child complete their FAFSA, right? The key is, in that email there's going to be a link, and you want to click that link where it says log in. Now this link in this email, it's valid for 45 days. I can't think of any reason why anyone would take that long. Like, you should be doing it same day or next day, but it is technically valid for 45 days. But for the parent, I encourage you to log into the FAFSA using the email that invited you from your child. Go ahead, Mike. So again, think of that flow chart. The student's now done their part. They've done their sections on the left. You now have gotten an email. When you click that email to say log in, when you're going to put in your FSA ID and all that stuff, you're going to see the student's information already preloaded, because if you follow this flow, the student will have done their part and they'll sign their part. So when you log in, you're going to see the student's basic information and all that good stuff. Then you parents are going to answer your demographics, and are you married? Did you remarry? Those kinds of things, right? Then it's going to ask about your financials. And this is where you got to, again, you will have to give consent and approve the Department of Ed to access your tax information from IRS. For the most part, if they can download it, if it all works, they can download it. You're going to basically be asked, like, do you have like foreign income? Like, I had a family that works in Canada, but their permanent residency is here in the States. They have foreign income, so we had to answer that kind of an extra question. There is going to be a question. This is something I think is just kind of I'm going to call it a glitch that the Department of Ed says should be fixed, but it's going to also ask on your tax return. It's essentially going to ask, is the size of your family the same as what is reported on your tax return? So if your tax return says, like mom, dad, and maybe 2 kids, family of 4, let's say, and you go, yeah, that's what we are. We're mom and dad, family, 2 kids, we're a family of 4. It's all the same. And so your instinct is going to say, yep, it's the same, and whatnot. And it's just going to pass on to the next screens. This is one of those times, a little pro tip, I'm going to tell you, check the box that says no. that our family, it basically says my family size has changed. Because what we are seeing is that it's always guessing the wrong family size. And that's an important part of the formula to determine your student aid index. So I always, when I'm filling it out for my families, I always say, no, my family size is not the same as the tax return. And the only reason I'm doing that is because then I can then manually report what the family size is. So that's just my own little personal tip. Say no to when it asks if your family size is the same. So you can double check and you can manually adjust the family size to the correct number. Because so far, every time I've tested it, it's always been wrong. So they say they'll get it fixed. I'm just being safe and, like I said, manually change it. But ultimately, after you get your tax information, your financial information put in, parents, you're done. You're going to sign it. And if everything went through correctly without glitching, no problems, if the student was able to sign their part and the parent was able to sign their part, almost immediately, or certainly usually within a few minutes, the student should get an email from the Department of Ed saying, we've received your FAFSA. And it should, and actually, can you show me the next slide, Mike? Yeah. Wait, is that the next one or did we jump? Oh, sorry. So this is, I should have mentioned, I apologize. I skipped a slide. On the financials, it is going to ask about your assets. So let's just talk about that real quick. So what is in your cash, checking, and savings accounts today? Okay. They're going to do it for the student and they'll do it again for you as the parents. It's going to ask about the net value of your investments. And you'll see, like as an example here, it says including real estate. Please remember, when they say real estate, they're not talking about your primary home. They're not talking about the home you live in. But if you have a second house, a rental property or something like that, they are asking about that. Okay. So you do want to add up and kind of like add up all your investments. So if you have something in a brokerage account and you had a second property, you're going to have to add up the values of both and put it in one, lump it all together and put it in this box. The other thing I want to mention, when it asks about investments, do not include your retirement accounts. So if you have money in a 401k or maybe a pension, anything like that, anything in that vein, you don't report any money that's in a retirement account. Okay. That's a common mistake I see all the time is reporting retirement accounts and sometimes including the primary home. And then lastly, if you should own a business or if you have a farm, that is something we have to report now is the value of that, the net worth, I should say, of a business or a farm. And if that applies to you, the advice I'm going to just give you, generic advice I'm going to give you is go with a pessimistic valuation, like hey, I have to sell in 30 days or less, not hey, I'm going to hold out and get the best price I want. It's if I had to sell today, what's the rock bottom dollar I would take, that I would have to take. So think of it in a more pessimistic way when you're valuing your business or a farm or anything like that. Okay, sorry. Let's talk about deadlines too. So deadlines, Mike already shared with you that even if you did the FAFSA tonight, none of the information is going to be shared with the schools until the end of this month at the earliest. It's even possible to be delayed beyond that. But with that said, schools still have deadlines. I've seen 4 schools that in the past 2 weeks where they had a deadline of today, at least their website, I should say, yesterday. Their website said the deadline was yesterday. And I had my families call the financial aid office to be like, hey, is this a real deadline or what? Because the FAFSA is a mess and all that. Admittedly, those, in my case, with my families, the school said, it's not a real deadline. We're just trying to encourage families to still submit the FAFSA as early as possible. But I wouldn't make that assumption that that's universally true, that every school is going to say, oh, yeah, we have a bunch of grades. They might be looking at the date that you submit the FAFSA my personal recommendation is, if you have a list of your schools and you put them on a spreadsheet, they'll tell you what the deadlines are on their website. I put the deadlines on that spreadsheet next to those schools. Just make sure you submit it, but before the earliest of those deadlines. But just check with each school. Check, is they're all a little different. And the final thing I would say about that is human nature. We tend to wait till the last day. One of my own kids did that. She waited to the final day to submit a supplemental form for financial aid to one of her schools. And what happened? In the case of my kid, internet went out and it was out for the rest of the day. So she missed the deadline. So I always say, don't wait till the final day. Submit, aim for a couple days before that final deadline. Okay. All right. Sorry. Let's go on. So this is what I was saying earlier when I jumped a couple slides. I apologize. That when your son or daughter successfully does their part of the FAFSA and signs it, and you as the parent successfully sign your part of the FAFSA, so it's like both parts have been signed. If it all went through correctly, your child should get an email that looks kind of like this, where it's going to say, "We've received your FAFSA," and it's going to show the submission date, and it's going to show what we call a DRN, a date release number. It might show even what a student aid index calculation is. I wouldn't put a lot of weight in that student aid index number right now. The formula is technically wrong. The Department of Ed did it wrong, and they were going to try to, admittedly they were going to try to leave it wrong, but it's kind of picked up in the news, and now they're talking, well, maybe we'll fix it. So I don't care so much about what that student aid index number says. But if you have a DRN number and it shows the submission date, I feel good. I feel good that you probably did everything just fine. Okay. Go ahead, hit next. And so a couple final tips. I shared a couple tips along the way. So, again, if we're a household where recently divorced or just maybe divorced, and we got to figure out who's the custodial parent. Again, it's going to be defined on who contributed the most in the last 12 months, not in 2022, but the most recent 12 months, who contributed the most. That's the custodial parent now. If you're a business owner, you now have to report the value of your business. In the past, you didn't have to. If you had less than 100 employees, now you have to. I will say, despite a lot of the flaws in this new FAFSA, the redesign does have some good benefits, some really good benefits for the low income families, where they're throwing more money potentially at you. So and Mike said this before, but everyone should apply for the FAFSA. Everyone should do it because every school requires it if you want to be considered for any financial aid. So I never had a reason to not file a FAFSA. And so this new design, this new formula is really going to help the lower income families. And then another little pro tip: if any family has 529 savings accounts, just remember two things. Remember two things. It's not a student asset. We talked about this in the previous financial aid presentation, but it's not a student asset for purposes of the FAFSA. It's going to be considered a parent asset. That's a good thing. And second is, let's say you have a couple kids and you had a couple 529 accounts. You don't, on the FAFSA, when it asks about that investments, you're not going to report all of the 529s cumulatively. You only have to report the portion that's for that particular student who you're doing the FAFSA for. So I hope that makes sense. So if you had 3 kids and each child had a 529 account and each of those accounts had 15,000 in it, cumulatively you had 45,000. You're not going to report 45,000. You only have to report the 15,000 for that child who you're doing the FAFSA for. So I hope that makes sense. But yeah, just a few tips there that I want to point out. Let's go on to the next. I'm going to defer back to Mike because Mike is deals with this on a day-to-day basis.
Thanks, JP. Um, so when you get your financial aid package from a school, um, there's always an opportunity to appeal for more aid. When you do this, you want to really tell your story because the schools are going to pull in a lot of data points that they have, right? The FAFSA information that they have, additional things like that. So make sure to share your story. What is unique that they might not be able to pull in? That's important. Um, Asking for a specific amount of aid is one strategy. Um, so that's something that if you're communicating that, hey, this is really the school I want to be at, right? This kind of goes 2 and 3. You would indicate, hey, this is where I want to be. I want to be a Sooner, right? I want to be a Trojan or whatever I want to be. This is where I want to be. And the only thing that's holding it back is the financial component, right? Don't just submit an appeal where it feels like, hey, I just need more money. Are you going to give me any? I'm going to submit to all my schools, right? Really make it unique to say, hey, I want to come to this school. This is where I want to be. I'm just concerned about the financial component there. And there's ways of articulating that. You can challenge expenses not considered on taxes. Being persistent, I will tell you this works. Demonstrating the interest, like I said, in the school, but really just being connected with the folks at the school, whether it's the admissions counselor that you've built a relationship with, or if you've gotten in contact with someone in the financial aid office, is important too. But I think the most important thing is that student leads the charge. When we're looking at appeals and we see that it's been written by the parents, that's something that on the appeal committee at OU, at least, we don't um, favor those like we would if a student was appealing and sharing their story. So I think that might be one of the most important things, that it's student led for the appeal. Something else to consider with appealing is number of students in college. So this is a big change where that was factored into the need analysis, the formerly the EFC, now the SAI, where the number in college is no longer part of that needs analysis. But colleges recognize that, right? We've been getting information from the FAFSA for years where it's been focused on, and now it's not going to be focused on. So this could be another appeal opportunity for families where you indicate that, and that could be something where the school does a professional judgment. So that's something where financial aid office has opportunity to look at that, but specifically the appeals team can look at that and say, okay, this is a student that previously would have qualified for need-based aid. If the school has aid that has flexibility, that might not be need-based, but is sometimes used in need-based committees, they could utilize that. So it's important to recognize the opportunities there for that as well. All right. So again, a lot of great information tonight. But what we don't want to happen is just take it, put it on a shelf, and not do anything with it. We want to keep the ball rolling. And some of those things we were talking about where there's just some specifics that it's like, hey, this is too complicated for a Q&A or a 1 hour session. Sign up for a meeting with the CAP Pro. There's a lot of folks, JP and I are two to be included, that can help you with a 1 hour consult, kind of talk through a lot of stuff where you feel like you're on much better ground. So I'm going to try to share my screen. I think, let's see.
Say while you do that, I just put it again in a link. There's a special landing page. We have a special discount for y'all. So if you want access to either the software to help you shop for schools, or you're just like, I just want to talk to someone, help me walk me through this and whatnot, there's a special discount for that too. So there's potentially 2 discounts on this landing page, which I just sent you in y'all in the chats.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, that link. So save that link in the chat. This is the landing page that JP was talking about. So it shows the discount. One thing to point out, that does expire on Tuesday. So the 23rd, that coupon code will expire. So again, what we don't want to happen is just to take all this information, put it on the shelf. So keep the ball rolling. Look into this. Hopefully you've had your MyCap free account set up. So just look into this and know that this is also an opportunity as well.